Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. So in this video, we're going to discuss a term known as Haspara. You've probably heard the term taqiyya so many times, but you haven't heard of the term Haspara, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to discuss the term Haspara. If some of you have heard about it, great. But if you haven't, then please pay attention. How is Haspara connected to the genocide that is taking place in Gaza? So we're going to discuss what is Haspara and how do Jews use Haspara? How do these Zionists use Haspara in order to justify their crimes and their genocides against humanity in Gaza? We're going to discuss how Haspara, which is a form of propaganda, it's used in the media in order to legitimize Israel's aggression without any boundaries against the Palestinian people. So we're going to discuss that in this video. Taqiyya and Haspara, the double standard in how lies manipulations are framed. When people criticize Islam, it is common for the term taqiyya to be brought up, accusing Muslims of using religiously sanctioned deception to advance their goals. This term is often used to cast suspicion and distrust on Muslims, framing them as inherently deceitful. Yet in discussions about Israel and Zionism, a similar and equally powerful tool of narrative control known as Haspara is rarely acknowledged for what it truly is: a systemic form of propaganda and manipulation designed to justify state policies and shape global opinion. While taqiyya is framed as a religiously rooted practice of deception, Haspara is a modern politically motivated effort by the Israeli government to control narratives through selective truths, emotional manipulation, and suppression of dissent. The double standard lies in how one form a strategic communication is stigmatized and mistrusted, while the other is often accepted as legitimate public diplomacy, even though both involve shaping perceptions through controlling information. This double standard distorts honest discussions, allowing one side's manipulative tactics to be ignored, while the other side is unfairly demonized. To understand global narratives fairly, we need to recognize that Haspara functions as a propaganda tool just as much as taqiyya is portrayed to be. Haspara is a Hebrew word meaning explanation, but in practice it functions as a state-driven propaganda tool used by the Israeli government and affiliated organizations to shape global opinion in Israel's favor, especially during conflict or political controversy. While it's often described as public diplomacy, Haspara goes far beyond explanation. It is a strategic system of narrative control built on selective information, emotional manipulation, and the suppression of criticism. How Haspara manipulates to control the narrative. Number 1. Selective framing of events. Haspara highlights attacks against Israel, such as Hamas rockets, but often ignores or minimizes the impact of Israeli military actions on Palestinians, including civilian casualties, occupation, and human rights violations. This one-sided framing makes Israel appear purely defensive, regardless of the broader context. And I can give you an example of this. Have you noticed how, for instance, when Israel, you have Al Jazeera, for instance, journalists asking Israeli Israeli officials or politicians. You've bombed all of these towns in Gaza. You've flattened them all. I mean, look at all of the innocent people you've killed. You've killed more innocent people than you've killed Hamas fighters, right? And so what they'd say, no, 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 no. We've actually killed more Hamas fighters than we've killed civilians. And then you ask them, where's the evidence of that? Where's the numbers? And they don't provide you. They don't even disclose you how many they've killed, what were their names, and what is the actual evidence that they were actually Hamas fighters, right? But this is interesting. These are the same guys that say Hamas is hiding in the tunnels. Hamas hides in the tunnels, and that's why so many innocent people die, because we can't get to them. They're in their tunnels, right? But then when you show them all the innocent people that have died, you've got 50, 60,000, they say, oh, that's nonsense. That's just, that's Hamas propaganda. That's Hamas media. Never trust Hamas media. But then at the same time, they say, oh, no, we've killed more Hamas fighters than we've killed civilians. So again, this is part of the selective framing and the pure propaganda that they put forward in order to legitimize their ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And then they would say that they are so moral, they are so justified in what they're doing, and their targeted shooting is not against civilians. They've actually killed more Hamas fighters than civilians. So this is part of their Haspara propaganda. Number 2, emotional manipulation. Haspara regularly employs emotionally charged language such as terrorists, human shields, or moral army to invoke fear and moral sympathy. A particularly powerful tactic is the frequent invocation of the Holocaust, even in unrelated contexts, to play the victim card and frame criticism of Israel as an existential threat to Jews. This emotionally manipulative strategy is designed to shut down debate and deflect attention from present-day actions. So true. Number 3, discrediting and silencing critics. When journalists, academics, or human rights groups criticizes Israel's policies, Haspara tactics often involve labeling them as anti-Semitic, biased, or anti-Israel. The delegitimizing opposing voices without addressing their actual arguments, a classic form of propaganda. Number 4, use of unverified or misleading claims. Haspara often relies on unverified allegations, such as claims that Hamas operates under hospitals or schools. These are used to justify military strikes on civilian areas. Even when these claims are later challenged or disproven, they have already served their purpose in shaping public opinion. Number 5, digital influence and social media manipulation. Numerous reports, including from OpenAI and Meta, have exposed Israeli-linked influence operations that use fake social media accounts, bots, and AI-generated content to amplify pro-Israel narratives and suppress Palestinian perspectives. This manipulation aims to dominate online discourse and drown out dissent. Number 6, targeted messaging in the West. Haspara is especially active in Western countries like the US and UK, where it works to influence public opinion, media coverage, and policy. It promotes Israel as a democratic ally while working to redefine anti-Semitism in ways that conflate it with any criticism of Israeli policy, a tactic that further silences debate. And we've seen that. You know how they basically shut down universities? When universities come out and protest against the government, and you have the students who are out there protesting in front of their universities, and they're setting up camps, and they're boycotting universities or their government officials and so forth. What do the Haspara influencers do? They go in and they speak to the governments, so those governments can then put sanctions on those universities if those universities do not fire and sack those students. So this is the way it actually works. Conclusion: Haspara is propaganda. Though it presents itself as explaining Israel's point of view, Haspara is fundamentally a system of propaganda. It controls narratives through selective truth, emotional appeals, delegitimization of criticism, unverified or misleading claims, digital manipulation. The goal is not just to inform, but to manipulate how the world sees the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, justify controversial actions, and suppress opposing perspectives, all under the guise of public diplomacy. Summary: examples of modern Haspara propaganda tactics: misinformation by Israel. So this is some of the examples. Number one of Haspara: the 40 beheaded babies lie. Widely circulated early in the war, Israeli and Western media claims Hamas beheaded 40 babies. The claim was pushed by Israeli spokesperson and amplified by outlets like CNN and Fox News. No evidence was ever provided. Israeli officials quietly walked it back, but by then the damage was done. Public opinion had been inflamed. This became a textbook example of emotionally charged atrocity propaganda. Number two, shooting emergency vehicles in Rafah. Israeli forces opened fire on Gaza emergency vehicles clearly marked with sirens and red markings. Israel claimed they couldn't see the sirens or didn't know it was an ambulance. Phone footage later exposed the lie. The lights and the sirens were fully visible. In some cases, Israel reportedly hid or delayed access to the bodies in ambulances to avoid international scrutiny. Number three, blocking aid, then blaming Hamas. Israel systematically blocks or delays humanitarian aid into Gaza via land crossing. When international outcries grow, Israel blames Hamas, saying it steals aid, sells it on the black market. These claims are rarely supported by evidence, while UN, Red Crescent, and NGOs confirm that Israel is the main obstruction to aid flow. Number four, starving children denial. Images and footages show Palestinian children in Gaza starving, their bodies reduced to skeleton frames. Israeli Haspara accounts denied the starvation, claiming these kids have muscular dystrophy or rare disease. Despite UN ICEF, WHO and WFP confirming mass malnutrition, Israeli downplays or ridicules such reports as Hamas propaganda. And this is true. It's really interesting because do you remember the image of the Israeli captive? How he's turned into skeleton, and he's got a shovel in his hand, and he's in a Hamas tunnel. And so they showed this, all the Israeli media, they showed this to the world to say, look how barbaric this is. While Hamas is eating, its belly is full. You have the captives, the hostages in this sort of situation. Clearly that they're being denied. They're being denied of aid. They're being denied of food, right? And Hamas is clearly systematically starving this hostage, right? So again, this is shifting the blame to Hamas. Yes, Hamas is starving the people because look, this hostage is turning into skeleton. Hamas, look what Hamas is doing. So it ignores all of the imagery, all of the pictures, everything. It ignores all of that of the Palestinian children who are being starved to death. It does not take any accountability that it is responsible. And despite even saying they're going to block the aid, their own officials said they're going to block the aid, right? And they said they're going to block this because this will pressure Hamas in releasing the hostages. So despite them admitting to this, they then have the audacity to blame Hamas for the starvation of the hostages. So again, this is again part of Haspara propaganda. Number 5, fake humanitarian gesture, airdrops after blocking aid. After thousands died from hunger and dehydration, Israel allowed small airdrops of food and water. This was used to project a false image of humanitarian concern while still blocking the vast majority of aid on the ground. These airdrops were filmed and distributed to deflect criticism, confuse global audience. And this is true because they actually did this as well when I think the first 1 or 2 months of the war. Well, I shouldn't even call it a war. See, this is another word that they injected into our vocabulary, that it is just a war. It's just a conflict. No, it's a genocide. A war is when two equal armies go to battle with one another. This isn't two equal armies. This isn't two armies that have military might. This is literally one army that has homemade rockets and the other one that has billions of backing of the most sophisticated weaponry committing genocide against the Palestinian people. So this isn't a war. So in the first 2 months of this genocide, that's a proper word to use. The first 2 months, you saw how they carpet bombed and completely destroyed most of the northern part of Gaza. So they'll just bombard it continuously day and night, right? There was no leaflets drops, no warning to evacuate, right? They just went in there, right? They did say move south. I'll give that to them. Yes, they did say move south. We're going to come in there. We're going to blow it up. But when they came in, they just indiscriminately started blowing every building they can see, right? Every building they could see. When they saw that this was looking really bad in the eyes of the international community, they then started dropping leaflets, right? Saying, evacuate this building, we're going to take it down in the next 1 minute or 2 minutes, right? So again, if they were so just, why didn't they do the leaflet drops from the very beginning? They didn't do that. They did it only when the international community condemned them for doing what they did. Number 6, tunnel propaganda. Hamas has food. Israel circulated IDF footages of Hamas fighters inside tunnels with supposed abundance of food. The goal to discredit claims of famine in Gaza. No independent verification was allowed, and most footage is selective, uncontextualized, or staged. Number 7. Staged Hamas aid distribution. Pro-Israel pages share images of Hamas handing out aid to children, then claim they take the food back off camera. These are speculative claims, often based on cherry-picked or edited clips with no credible sourcing. The goal is to undermine Hamas' legitimacy and erase evidence of their role in aid distribution under siege. And even if something like this happens, you're going to get corruption everywhere. Who says that they're part of Hamas, for example? Again, I'm not here defending Hamas, and this isn't a video for Hamas. We don't defend Hamas. We're defending the Palestinian people. But what they're saying is that these people who are giving charitable aid to Palestinian children on camera, and then off camera they're removing it. One could imagine that there are corrupt individuals all over the place. It doesn't mean that they're tied to Hamas. Yes, there are people, unfortunately, stealing aid. There are people who are stealing other people's monies. This happens not just in Palestine. This happens even in the first world. We remember what happened in the Western world, where the bushfires happened in Australia, or the floods happened in America, where you'd have looters going through buildings and stealing things, where you had people setting up fake donation accounts to rot communities and people. So this isn't immune to the West. Why would it be immune to people in Gaza, especially people who are even more desperate? So people who are even more desperate are going to turn to more corrupt measures, and unfortunately that does happen. But just recently we saw in the media where Hamas said it executed certain individuals stealing aid from food trucks. So, of course, that's never highlighted in Western Israeli Haspara propaganda, is it? Number 8. Shifa Hospital propaganda blunder. Israeli soldiers claimed they found a wall in Shifa Hospital with names of Hamas operatives. It was later exposed that the writing was just a weekly calendar in Arabic, completely unrelated to Hamas. When caught, Israel said it was a genuine mistake. This undermined trust in the IDF claims and highlighted their pattern of misinterpreting Arabic to justify military action. Number 9. Targeting UN schools and claiming Hamas bases. After bombing UNRWA schools sheltering displaced civilians, Israel often claims they were Hamas command centers. These claims are made before any investigation, and even when UNRWA invites independent review, Israel refuses cooperation. A pattern emerges where schools, hospitals, and mosques are rebranded as terrorist sites post-strike to justify civilian deaths. Number 10. Manipulative language, human shields excuse. Israel repeatedly uses the term human shields to rationalize mass civilian casualties. The term is applied broadly even when civilians are not in active combat zones. This tactic is designed to preemptively deflect blame for deaths of children, women, and the elderly. Number 11. Selective outrage, fake sympathy for Palestinian civilians. Israeli spokespeople often say, we mourn innocent Palestinians too, while blocking independent aid, media, and investigation. The sympathy is performative, used to humanize the aggressor and weaken criticism without changing policy. Number 12, media manipulation and censorship. Foreign journalists are banned from entering Gaza unless embedded with IDF. Western media are forced to rely on Israeli military briefings, leading to one-sided narratives. Footage from Palestinian journalists is often dismissed or labeled as Hamas propaganda, even when verified. When Israel is questioned on why they refuse Western media journalists, they would say they refuse because they care about their safety. This is another attempt to justify censorship in order to hide their war crimes. Number 13, AI-generated and misleading images. Some Haspara accounts have been caught using AI-generated images or photos from other war zones to blame Hamas or show Israeli suffering. When caught, they rarely retract. The goal is to circulate content faster than it can be debunked. Now we will show examples of how Israeli propaganda Haspara works online. Example 1. So, for example, to deny famine caused by the Israeli blockade, the Zionists will post images like this. So you can see the image on the screen, these big open markets with plenty of food, fresh vegetables. Scenes from, this is the post from the Honest Reporting, and they call it Honest Reporting. They say, scenes from a bustling street market in Gaza that the media will never show, filmed July 28, 2025 at Al Sahaba market in Gaza City. Here's the response. But when we run the image through ChatGPT fact-checking, this is the result we get. Here is what we know about the image and the claims surrounding it. What appears to be accurate. According to recent reports, Al Sahaba market in Gaza City was indeed photographed and filmed on July 28, 2025, showing open stalls with fruit, vegetables, canned foods, and customers paying in Israeli shekels. Coverage confirms that the IDF, in coordination with the UAE and Jordan, carried out food airdrops on the same day, leading to increased availability of supplies in the market in the hours shown. So the basic claim, an active bustling market scenes on the date, is credible. Why it's misleading in context? Now listen to this. Independent sources describe Al Sahaba market in earlier months as silent or empty, with stores shuttered or shelves bare, reflecting Gaza's deep food insecurity early in 2025. Aid agencies, UN doctors, and humanitarian organizations continue to warn of widespread famine, especially in northern Gaza and among vulnerable populations, despite isolated scenes of activity. Local accounts confirm prices in the market are extremely high. Listen to this. Local accounts confirm prices in the market are extremely high, often beyond the financial reach of most residents. Example, sugar, tomatoes, fruit being sold at elevated rates, and many goods from donated supplies being resold at inflammatory prices. A journalist featured in reporting acknowledged that the footage was genuine, but stressed that the high prices meant most Gazans simply cannot afford the food on display, and that overall availability remains limited to staples only. Summary. Claims. Verdict: market was bustling on July 28, 25. It's true. True scenes disprove famine. No. Misleading: food available and affordable for most locals. Not supported. Final assessment. The photo of the busy Al-Shabaab market was indeed taken on July 28, 2025, showing activity after humanitarian airdrops. But using that to argue media never shows everyday life in Gaza or to deny reports of hunger and chronic shortage is misleading. While some goods circulated briefly, the overall humanitarian situation remains dire, with most Gazans facing scarcity, high inflation, and inability to afford food, as verified by multiple independent sources and aid agencies. This is a classic Haspara, cherry-picking a rare busy market scene to pretend Gaza isn't starving, while ignoring that most people can't afford the food and shortages are still severe. It's propaganda, not the full truth. Check this out. This is a meme. Zionist prisoners before Israel started complete blockade of Gaza. Look how full they were, right? Look how healthy these hostages look, right? When Hamas released them. But soon as Israel imposed the blockade, this was the result. Example 2. This was posted by Isreal news agency. They write, "This is not AI. These children used as human shields were choked to death by hands of Hamas." Have a look. They say that these children that Hamas was holding were choked to death by Hamas. And someone writes in the comments saying, "This is truth." And we ask the video evidence answer. Well, where's the video evidence of Hamas strangling these babies to death? And the answer is, trust me, bro. We have the video, right? Response. Now let's again fact check the image on ChatGPT. The post is unsubstantiated and follows a pattern of emotive misinformation. No credible or verifiable video evidence has surfaced showing Hamas choking to death children used as human shields in the manner claimed. Previous viral claims about Hamas using children as human shields or committing atrocities, example the recycled 2021-23 Human Shields video narrative, have been debunked by fact-checkers like AFP, Lead Stories, and Check Your Fact as miscaptioned, old or outdated context. That said, the broader information war is messy, accusation of Hamas exploiting civilians have appeared in the past and are part of competing propaganda streams, and children have been used in narratives on both sides. Sensational claims like babies beheaded have also been widely debunked as hoaxes, showing how easily emotionally charged stories spread without solid verification. Summary: there's no verified evidence backing the specific claim in this post. It appears to be weaponized, unproven narrative in the broader information conflict. Example 3. This Gaza photography stages Hamas propaganda. Response. The claim here is that there's no starvation in Gaza and that this photo is somehow staged. But let's apply some basic logic. What we're seeing is a group of people, many of them children, holding empty pots. Does that automatically mean they're being fed abundantly? Or could it simply mean they're waiting for food to arrive? If and when it ever does, through the trickle of humanitarian aid allowed in. Suggesting this is staged ignores the devastating reality on the ground. People are starving, aid is being blocked or delayed, food is scarce, children are begging for meals, and entire families often wait hours in line with empty pots just for a chance of a hot meal, if any arrives at all. To call this Hamas propaganda is not just dishonest, it is an international erasure of Palestinian suffering. It's a classic Haspara tactic: deflect from the humanitarian catastrophe by attacking the image, the photographer, or the narrative. This isn't staged. What's staged is a denial campaign trying to convince the world that starvation, suffering, and desperation are just props in some political theatre. Example 4. This was posted by Isreal in the USA. They say, "Watch! A terrorist proudly filmed himself launching mortars from a civilian tent in Gaza. If that wasn't enough, the video clearly shows the weapon leaning on a bag of humanitarian aid." You can see here. See the humanitarian aid bag and the weapon leaning on it. Response. This is a textbook example of Haspara propaganda. The claim being made is that Hamas launched the rocket from a civilian humanitarian tent, but the video provides no evidence to support this. There are no visible tents nearby, no signs of a functioning humanitarian site. What we actually see is an isolated area surrounded by broken construction materials, not a civilian facility. Spreading disinformation like this serves one purpose: to give Israel a pretext to justify bombing humanitarian zones by falsely claiming Hamas uses them as human shields. As for the presence of a humanitarian aid bag, does that prove it's a humanitarian site? Of course not. Just as civilians have access to aid, so too would any individual in the area, including fighters. That alone is not evidence of anything. This narrative is yet another deliberate attempt by Zionist propaganda to paint Hamas as launching attacks from civilian and humanitarian areas in order to legitimize Israelis' indiscriminate targeting of those very zones. It's not just misleading, it's dangerous. Example 5. This is posted by Israel in Cyprus, another Facebook page. They say, "There is food in Gaza. Hamas is deliberately starving the hostages. Let them go now." And again, they post all of these images of abundance of food. Response. This post is a textbook example of Israeli Haspara propaganda, using selective imagery to create a misleading narrative while erasing the broader humanitarian reality. Here's why this is manipulative. Number 1, cherry-pick snapshots. Israel shows a few market stalls in Gaza with fruit and snacks, ignoring that these goods are rare, overpriced, and inaccessible to most civilians due to the blockade and destruction of infrastructure. The presence of food in some places doesn't mean the population isn't starving. Just like showing a luxury car in a poor neighborhood doesn't prove everyone there is rich. Number 2, deceptive framing. By saying there is food in Gaza, Israel implies that hunger is Hamas doing, sidestepping the fact that Israel has direct control over Gaza's borders, imports, fishing waters, and airspace, and has repeatedly bombed bakeries, farms, aid convoys, and food warehouses. Even UN reports confirm famine risks in Gaza is due to Israel's restrictions. Number 3, shifting blame. The post focuses on alleged hostage starvation, but fails to address the documented starvation of over 2 million civilians, many of whom are children. It refrains the crises as Hamas's fault, even though Israel itself has blocked flour shipments, refused aid trucks, and weaponized food scarcity. And we've actually seen this. We've seen how even the settlers, remember the videos that were being circulated of the settlers blocking food trucks And then they're getting happy about it and celebrating and saying, "Look, we've blocked these trucks," and you can see. And they not only do they block it, they destroy. They were destroying the food, and you can see the food being scattered all over the floor, destroying it, throwing it to the ground, ripping the packets. This was actually published by those same settlers themselves, saying, "Look," and they were justifying it. They were saying, "We're destroying this because this aid is going to get to Hamas. We need to destroy it. We need to destroy this." And they were so proud about it. Number 4, psychological tactic. These happy vendor images are intended to calm international outrage, suggesting normal life continues in Gaza. In reality, the majority of Gazans face extreme hunger, and these rare supplies are often unaffordable luxuries in devastating economy. Now let's get to number 6. This was posted by TRT, and it's showing Israeli army unit tasked with discrediting Palestinian journalists. It says, a special unit known as Legitimization Cell has been tasked with identifying Palestinian journalists in besieged Gaza and smearing them as undercover Hamas members. According to a report by Plus 972 magazine, the unit aimed to discredit reporters and blunt growing international outrage over Israelis' killing of journalists. Most recently, Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif and 5 of his colleagues killed in an Israeli airstrike on August 10. The team also gathered intelligence for Haspara public diplomacy, aimed at bolstering Israel's legitimacy abroad and ensuring continued U.S. military support. Sources told Plus 972 that the unit maintained direct channels with American officials, and intelligence officers were told their work was vital to prolonging the war. Someone wrote in the comment, "It's all well documented. They'll never bury the truth. They will be brought to justice." So let's respond. This report is directly tied to Haspara, Israeli public diplomacy, because the legitimization cell was created to manage Israel's global image. Its role was not only to discredit Palestinian journalists by smearing them as Hamas operatives, but also to gather intelligence that could be used to shape international narratives. By undermining credible reporting on Israeli killing of journalists and controlling how events were framed abroad, the unit worked to bolster Israeli legitimacy, reduce global outrage, and secure ongoing U.S. military and political backing. In short, it shows how Haspara goes beyond propaganda. It is backed by intelligence operations designed to suppress inconvenient truths and prolong support for Israel's war efforts. And we've actually seen a classic attempt of Haspara where an actual journalist asked about, remember those vehicles that were shot at, what we mentioned before in this article, where the vehicles had their sirens on, and then Israel claimed they couldn't see any sirens, they didn't see any markings on the vehicles of it being emergency vehicles. Then they quickly hid the bodies and buried them, later discovered by UN officials. So when their ministers and their political leaders, when they were questioned about this atrocity and why they did a cover-up, so the first initial response from them was they couldn't see the markings. Later, this was disproven and video footage disproved that. Later, they said, "Oh, it was just a mistake. It was just a mistake." And So what they did was, instead of punishing those responsible for committing this genocide and murder, hiding the bodies and quickly burying them, what did they do? Did they throw them in jail? No. Did they charge them for war crimes? No. What did they do? What exactly do you know what they did? They stood them down. That was it. They just stood them down from their workplace. Imagine. If it's a mistake, then you should allow them to continue to operate, right? Why did you stood them down if it was just a mistake? It's because you know they were guilty and you're covering for their tracks. So again, this is Haspara tactics to justify ethnic cleansing. And whenever they're caught, they just stood them down. They just put it under the carpet. Don't charge them for war crimes. And before we end this video, we'll do a quick rebuttal. A Zionist wrote, Takia, they said, based on religious justification for distorting reality against logic while deliberately misleading people for specific purpose, usually immoral and violent. And then they say Haspara equals based on using reality while using logic to harness people to a specific idea for their benefit. Hope I helped you. And I don't even compare Judaism to Islam. It insults me. Let's respond. Thank you for your response, but let's clear up some distortions. Taqiyya is misrepresented again. The idea that taqiyya is some Islamic license to lie is a tired, debunked Islamophobic trope. In reality, taqiyya was a historical concept used primarily by Shia Muslims as a form of self-preservation when they were being persecuted, not as a tool for deception. It's no different than Jews or Christians concealing their faith under threat or torture of death throughout history. So no, it's not religious justification for distorting reality. That's a projection, not a fact. Number 2, Haspara is propaganda by definition. Haspara is not a noble exercise in using reality and logic. It literally means explanation in Hebrew, but in practice it refers to coordinated efforts by the Israeli government and affiliated groups to shape international opinion, often by downplaying or justifying human rights abuses, military aggression, and occupation. From scripted talking points to online manipulation campaigns, Haspara is about damage control, not truth. That's not logic, that's state-sponsored PR. Number 3, don't compare Judaism to Islam. It insults me, he wrote. You're insulted by a comparison between two Abrahamic faiths that share common prophets, values, dietary laws, and scripture. That says more about your prejudice than any ideological difference. Islam respects Moses, Abraham, and even the Torah as originally revealed. Can the same be said in reverse? Refusing any comparison is not a defense, it's a deflection. If Islam and Judaism are both monotheistic traditions with deep ethical frameworks, why the outrage at putting them side by side? Let's be honest, if anyone here is distorting reality to serve a political agenda, it's not Muslims invoking taqiyya, it's those hiding behind Haspara.